Welcome to the CivilNet podcast. My name is Arshila Goyen. I'll be the host for today. Sitting across from me are Timothy Straight and Kirk Wallace. Timothy has been in Armenia for over 20 years. He's the founder of the Homeland Development Initiative Foundation, which started in 2013 with the mission of bringing fair trade jobs to women in rural Armenia. And today he's expanded that mission into the wool industry. Kirk Wallace has spent years in Armenia's social investment space. He helped bring the VIA Fund to life and is the founding member of the Zartir initiative coming from the Impact Hub. Thank you both so much for being with me today. It's a real honor and pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just for some context, I wanted to talk a bit about how this came to be. I first met Tim when I was about 1/3 of my current age and half my current height. It was my first or second trip to Armenia as a diasporan Armenian. And Tim left a strong impact on me for two reasons. The first was that Tim is very, very tall, and in a landscape of Armenians, stands out like a sore thumb. He is visibly not ethnically Armenian himself. The second reason he stood out was because upon learning about what Tim was doing here, I was struck that someone without the cultural attachments that I had would commit to spending years of their life being here, embedding themselves in the fabric of this place, and improving things. Kirk, I met for the first time on this trip, but was inspired for all of the same reasons. I think it's such a relief and an honor and an inspiration for me as a diasporan Armenian to meet and interact with people who come from elsewhere and really make the effort to integrate. So really, thank you both for all of your work over the years.
You're giving me goosebumps. Really.
What connected you two initially is Arm.wool, or that's what you're working on now together. For those in the audience who haven't heard of Arm.wool, what is it?
I'm going to let Tim take the first question.
All right, Tim's going to take the first question.
Okay, if I can do a little historical.
Please.
I knew after about 12 years of running HDIF that we were struggling to make a profit. We were struggling to be sustainable. And I'm seeing a market that is shifting internationally away from the synthetics, away from the trinkets, I guess I could say, and towards the more sustainable, towards stronger stories behind the product, towards more natural materials, towards circular economy, and towards sustainable value chains. And so I've been thinking about this for a couple of years. How are we going to do this? We need to move away from synthetic fibers and over to something natural. Then I happened, through my engagement in Fair Trade, the World Fair Trade Organization, at a conference in Berlin, I met a person who described a project they had in Sri Lanka, extracting fibers from banana trees. When you grow a banana tree, you harvest the banana, you chop down the tree, and you burn it. Someone created a project to extract those fibers and weave very nice cloth out of it. Amazing story, circular value chain, and create a huge market for it in Europe. And I thought, wow, what do we have in Armenia that we can do the same thing, more or less? And then I learned that there is a problem with wool in Armenia, that the wool industry is based on raising sheep for meat. There are 1,500 tons of wool that are burned every year in Armenia. We need to do something with this. Now, HDF has a job creation mandate, but by using that wool, we're going to be able to create jobs all along the value chain. We'll go further into depth, but that's the basic background for it. And then Kirk, who is on our board in HDIF, thought this is an interesting engagement and volunteered not to just be a board member, but to be actively involved in this new project. So, and here we are.
Wow. So Kirk, when did you hear about it for the first time, and when did you make the decision to be even more invested than you had been?
Well, this goes back several years. When Tim first came up with the idea, of course, we hang out, right? So I knew about it from the beginning that this was going on, but at this time I was doing other things. But my business partner, Anima Kirkjan, became his project lead. So she went into HDIF to run Arm.wool, and she's running Arm.wool essentially. And so at that point, our business slowed down, Ani and I's, and then I said, okay, well, let's shift. Let's move over. They need help. They're finding success over there with Arm.wool. It's becoming overwhelming in terms of the work to do and the interest it's garnering. So I said, let's jump over and help out where I can. And it ends up that I'm on the industrial end of the wool project. It started, and Tim will give you more details on this. It started in the heritage and the cultural uses of wool, which is typically here carpets and maybe some other things like this. But most of that wool that's available won't be used for carpets, so we have to find a different use for it. So that's where I come in, and so that's where I jumped in, and I'm trying to figure out uses for this wool. And if we can figure that out, then we reduce the burning even more.
I love this impulse to go where you're needed, right? This notion that there's a landscape, there are things that need doing, and being open to addressing those things and investing yourself in them.
And it's an interesting thing, because this is something I used to preach when I was a teacher in high school. I used to tell my students, basically, you have to be flexible and adaptable. And this was our mantra back when we were teaching. If you're flexible and adaptable, you can usually catch on and do different things if you're not just rigid down one line. So
yeah, and this is something that is I've been thinking about for 2 or 3 years already, that we need to make a shift. I just didn't know what shift to make, basically. And then recently, one of our other board members, Nazra Seferian, who is today the interim executive director of the Impact Hub, who's also on our board, he said, Tim, this is the year of the fire horse. And I thought, what the heck does that mean? And he said, this is the year where big shifts are going to happen. And things are going to get broken and things are going to get built. New things are going to come out of the ashes So this has been a very chaotic year so far, and we're only in August. We have 4 more months of this. So there's been such big changes, and we see it in the world that big changes are happening. But we really feel strongly that we are living in the year of the fire horse. And so we're making the big shift. We have to. We have no choice.
I love that as a framework through which one can understand what's happening around them. In the spirit of that kind of burning away of the old and making space for what's new, there's something poetic about the idea that what is burning away in this case is the tradition or the practice of burning wool and wasting it. In terms of each of your own experience over the last year, what has burned away, what is coming in that's new, what has been shifting, and what are you anticipating will continue to change?
You want me?
Yeah, go
you want me? No, it's the. I knew that what we had been doing for 12 years wasn't working properly. I knew something radical needed to be done. And it's my job as the founder and the executive director to think. I keep telling my staff this. It's my job to think of the big, hairy goal, the big, hairy, impossible goal. We need to look hugely forward, right? And then we need to bring along all those that want to be part of this and who are willing to change. And then some people find it unsettling or upsetting, but that's my job is to stake out the big, hairy goal. So what is my big, hairy goal for this? With the job creation that we need to do, with the environmental impact, positive environmental impact that we want to do, for me, it's about having a national wool strategy. We don't know exactly how many sheep there are in Armenia. We don't know how many are vaccinated. We don't have the vaccination records. We don't know how many are clipped on the ear so we can follow. We don't know the generational, the species generationally. Now, we don't know everything. There might be information that we haven't found yet, of course. In the government, in particular, both national and regional, on the Mars level, might have information that we're not aware of yet. And this is why we're expanding our staff with one position in the next month or so, is to do a better job of collecting that data. But through the 2 years we've been doing this, we don't see that there's enough information written down and systemized to create a national wool strategy. The government has recently launched a new program to multiply the number of sheep or increase the number of sheep that are raised in Armenia. For what goal? That is for meat production, not for wool production. So they're thinking, what species and what sheep can we have that will produce the best meat, right? Where our problem is, okay, we're not going to try to change that. We're not going to try to stop that, but they're going to be sheared and there's going to be more wool. And Kirk mentioned the heritage side of things. That's where we started. Armenian carpets. We all love Armenian carpets with the dragon symbol and the and little animals on it. We love Armenian carpets. If we take all the wool that is used in those carpets, it's only going to use a maximum today of 2 to 3% of the total wool that is produced today. If the government is increasing the number of sheep, it's going to shrink. So we have to make a heck of a lot more carpets in Armenia if we're going to use all that wool and prevent its burning. And yeah, it's not going to happen. So that's why we're moving into the industrial. We're looking for industrial solutions on the use of big quantities of wool that will require a mechanical production line, a factory level kind of thing, to use tons and tons and tons and tons of wool. So this is the big hairy goal is national wool strategy. Where do we want to go with this wool production? How much is there going to be? How is it going to be sheared? Are we going from scissors to shearing machines? Are we doing education on how the wool is skirted, as it's called? The gunky stuff is taken off before it's sent to a collection center. Where is that collection center? How are we? And then that in the collection center, it is scoured, it is washed and cleaned. Are the washing agents biologically sound? Are they? There's 1,000 steps along this value chain that we want to establish, but we need a national structure to do that. And we hope the government will be along for the ride. If not, we'll do it ourselves, kind of, sort of. But then the industrial side is the big one on using that wool for something constructive. Many people, knee-jerk reaction, oh, make sweaters. Okay, I asked, how scratchy are the Iceland sweaters? Very famous sweaters, Icelandic sweaters, big bulky sweaters. Yeah. They are scratchy, apparently. So that is a possibility of making fashion out of this wool, but I seriously doubt that's going to be the volumes that are going to use 1,500 tons plus as they increase the stock of sheep in the country. But I'd really love to know, how many sheep are there in Armenia? We don't know.
So it may be helpful to the viewers to have a quick and dirty guide to what's been done so far.
That would be great.
Okay. So one of the original intents of the project was to establish a value chain for blockchaining, right? The blockchain sounds crypto-ish, but it's not. A blockchain is simply following the wool from, as we say, provenance to product, right? From the shepherd and the sheep all the way to a product. And they established really the first blockchain maybe in the country with some carpets. And these carpets, I'll explain what happened. So the blockchain occurs. You start with the sheep and the shepherds. So we went to Darik, right? Is it Darik? Darik is a village. The village of 3 people, and this guy has, I don't know, 1,000 sheep or so, but he gives them their shots, and he notates all the information on them. We know who the shepherds are. Then they brought in some professional shearer from Scotland, and with machines so that they're not doing it by hand. And they sheared the sheep. So we know who is shearing the sheep now. We know how they're shearing the sheep more humanely, quicker, more efficiently. Then we know where the wool goes. The wool goes to a processing facility in Amasya, which is in Shirak, Mars. Goes to Amasya. They clean it, as Tim was saying, and then it goes right next door to a spinning center where women in Amasya are spinning that wool into yarn, hand spun. All right, so then that hand spun wool goes either to a dyer who does natural dyeing, or it goes to, a carpet maker. And in this sense, and Tim will correct me if I'm inaccurate in this, Ani, the project lead, went and I forget who the name. It's IO Collective. The IO.
AHA Collective.
Excuse me. I'm
AHA
sorry.
Collective.
I'm sorry. Nadia, I'm sorry. AHA Collective, and the AHA Collective brought in some designers for these carpets from France, and they designed these carpets for the Golden Apricot Festival last year's, and they became the red carpets. They weren't red, but they became the carpets, and there were 8 of them, if I'm not wrong, and they were blockchained. The first blockchain products in Armenia through an organization that blockchain certifies out of Sweden, if I'm not mistaken on that one.
Oh, cool.
So this is a value chain that's been created. It's established, and our job now is to bolster it, strengthen it, and then expand it where we can. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to scale the chains. We're trying to increase the amount of chains that are in the country, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then if I can just expand on that.
Yeah.
Tell us if we talk too much.
Yeah,
Obviously,
no,
we're
please.
enthusiastic
That's why
about
you're
this.
here. Yeah.
Right. Along that whole value chain that he just described, there's a lot of things we call rabbit holes, problems that we need to solve eventually at some time. If we have somebody's support, if we have the will, the time, the cochineal bug. The cochineal bug is what provides the red color for natural dyeing. Cochineal is in the Red Book of Endangered Species in Armenia. So the cochineal today is imported, what is used in the natural dyeing, right? There's one village in Armavir, Mars, where the cochineal live and thrive. It is only the female during 2 weeks in the spring of each year that produce the red color. Okay? So here you have this village in Armenia that has the cochineal bug that's connected to the carpet industry. We could replace the imports if that became an industrial production. However, are the volumes there? It's an amazing story, obviously. Why not make that village a tourist destination? To come and see where the cochineal come from and connect it to a storytelling about rug making, about natural dyeing in Armenia. Connect Woolway, connect the carpet makers, connect Tufenkian to this story. We just need the manpower and the will to make this into a sustainable something. That's just one rabbit hole, all right? So
what you're describing as far as recording everything through the blockchain, every step of the process, and then understanding through a narrative perspective what's happening there and creating excitement around each of those processes, the formats. It's a really interesting notion because it kind of ties with an overall ethos, the idea of efficiency, of environmental considerations, but getting excited about those things and being able to identify which products are considerate of them and which ones aren't. And then creating things like what you just described, where there isn't only an ecological, sustainable process, but there's an excitement around that draws people to that part of the blockchain, to that part of the infrastructure. All of this is kind of happening alongside, let's say, an economic and cultural conversation towards a pivot to Europe, and like meeting European market standards, European expectations for like quality and processes. So what you guys are doing is leading the charge, I would say, in that regard. And I think when we think about cultural shifts, there's both policy and then there's a sincere feeling of wanting to be a part of something that is changing. It seems to me like the producers and exporters here that adapt their processes to meet EU regulations will be able to enter the market. But the actors here who really buy into the ethos and who are motivated by these outcomes, environmental outcomes, like fair trade outcomes, will be able to innovate because they'll be thinking in ways beyond just meeting base level requirements. It seems like this is how you guys operate in trying to understand these things. So I guess, how do you feel that the cultural landscape in Armenia is being shaped by this? Does it feel like there is movement in that direction? Is there a lot of resistance? Where is the resistance?
I think it's in its infancy still,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
EU is going to what's called a digital product passport, DPP. They're going to require something. It's similar to a blockchain, right? They have to know, you have to for selling, or for them to import products in, right? The products have to meet a standard, right? These standards of it not environmentally destructive, that you're not abusing the workers, on and on and on, right? That
verification
of those things. So any Armenian company that wants to export to Europe is going to have to develop this anyway. It's going to have to happen. Now, I don't know what the government is doing in terms of educating the public on this, or the business world on this. Maybe Tim knows better. But it's coming in Europe. It's supposed to take effect this fall. Actually. So anybody doing that here, anybody setting up their business to meet those standards now, is just smart. They're looking ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And since Arm.wool is one of the few that are doing it, and I don't know the landscape here of all the businesses. They're a leader in this. They've done it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the blockchain is pretty much a DPP. There'd have to be some adjustments, of course, to match the EU standards, but it's almost there. So in that sense, Arm.wool is kind of the trailblazer here. They're taking the lead in this, and I think anybody wants to scale and export, they're going to have to look into this. They're going to have to.
I mean, the new packaging law in Europe kicked in, I think, 2 days ago. Right? And you can't send a product this big in a package this big anymore with a lot of plastic on it. And they say, you can't do that to Europe anymore. And so what's our role? We've had one client who's making bags, and they want to use all natural materials as much as they can, and they want it to be circular. They've bought into the whole thing. They know more about DPP than we do, actually, in our conversations with them. And they said, we'd like to make our packaging out of wool. Biodegradable packaging, horribly expensive compared to a sheet of plastic, obviously, but they understand the necessity of doing that. They're 5 years ahead of everybody else on that. We need to think innovatively like that. We need to think of other industries where we can use the wool for mass production of something to replace plastics.
This is existentially, this is a battle of wool or natural fibers versus plastic. In Armenia, if I'm not mistaken on this either, they're about to ban the use of single-use plastics. Right. So what do they replace this with? Well, maybe wool can step in certain areas. You just mentioned packaging. Like, wool packaging is fantastic. I mean, you want an industrial use it for packaging, to replace bubble wrap, for example.
We got a package of samples from Norway just last week or the week before. In Norway, they are making flower pots out of wool. I don't know how they do it, but it looked like a normal flower pot, but it's made out of wool. The more interesting thing for me was the fact that in that cardboard box with those 2 flower pots in it, the packaging was wool. It was protected. It's natural. It's biodegradable. It's not anything plastic in that box. I went to the customs house here in Yerevan in order to get those. And we opened the box. They wanted to see what you were importing. Opened it, and she looked at the flower pot, and she went, "Oh, it's plastic. Okay, no customs on it." And I went, "Do I tell her that it's actually made out of wool?" And, no. So this is just I'm thinking, wow, the whole world, our world at least, is moving in that direction. Right. When we see plastic, when I see certain coffee spots in Yerevan that are serving everything in a plastic cup, there's a couple of them near where I live at the Cascade. Everything is plastic. I'm horrified by it. And so yeah, I'd love to see what are we going to do with recycled paper or wool or biodegradable something. We have to move away from this. And our job then, again, create the jobs all along the value chain, tell the story, in order to use up this wool.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is relevant so much, but plastic is new to Armenia in the last 3 decades. Right, collapse of the Soviet Union, in comes the Western style packaging, which is all plastic in terms of these huge plastic containers for little items. This has implications in my mind for even things like national security. Okay, when you have no way to dispose of plastic because you don't have any, there's no infrastructure that was naturally here for plastics. Everything was biodegradable, and it's just biodegraded. And when plastics came in, then you start seeing them all over the place. We've had conversations before about the Christmas tree that you see with the plastics and the trees. It's getting better, but there's still an issue with this, right? So wool handles and solves a lot of those problems.
Do you remember earlier this year when the New Barashan garbage dump? It's there because of all the plastic we use and all the junk and because it's not being handled, and they set it on fire. And the air quality, you couldn't go outside there's like a week in the spring where you couldn't go outside. It just smelled acrid. And we're on the back office of that problem, trying to reduce what gets dumped into garbage dump. I mean, we're part of a macro problem, a macro challenge. We're a little chunk of that, and trying to reduce the amount of stuff that gets dumped, that gets burned, that pollutes our air, that reduces quality of life.
We're not going to get rid of plastic. This is not our job, and it's not our intent. It's to reduce the ridiculous use of plastic and the overuse of plastic. And I must say that this is a international problem. Okay, any country you go to, I've spent a lot of time traveling throughout Africa. They've got an incredible problem with plastic disposal. It goes in the rivers and ends up in the oceans. It clogs everything up, and they have this problem too. And they burn it to reduce it, and you kind of smell it all the time. And also the burning of the wool, okay, which is terrible, and puts all kinds of toxins and pollutants into the air, reducing air quality. So the issues of Armenia are also the issues of a good chunk of the world. So to work on solutions here is to also work on global solutions, right? And it's no BS either.
Yeah.
It's an actual real, like, if we can solve some problems here, these have relevance other places.
It's not like burning wool is a uniquely Armenian challenge. It's done all across Europe. It's done all across North America. And we've already had people saying, wow, if you can figure that out, we'd love to learn from you. Can you imagine Armenian being the place that people come to learn things? Instead of Armenian bringing in expertise in order to learn. We're the school. We are the lab. We're the
living lab.
The living lab. What do you mean by that, Kirk? Living lab.
Living lab.
It's a small country. We know we can make big changes, have a big impact with less money spent. The dollar, the dram goes further here than other places, and because of our unique situation in regulations and labor costs and whatnot, if somebody from Europe wants to figure out how to produce something or make something or improve something, they can do it here. I mean, we have the infrastructure here to get it done. And we're getting the expertise. And it's not expertise that we have naturally. I mean, we're learning. We have help from Norway and Sweden in particular. I'll be going up to Sweden in the end of September to meet one of the foremost experts on wool production, maybe in the at least in Europe, and to learn from this guy.
He's on the European Wool Board.
Yeah,
this is a hot shot.
Yeah, and he was here for Nordic Days, and he took a liking to Armenia. And that's important too.
Yeah.
Right. So he's like, you guys can get this done, and
we have Sweden is interested in us. The UK is interested in us because of the unique things we're doing. Norway is interested in us. They're sending us samples of flower pots. The Netherlands is supporting us through the POOM program of expertise that we're taking advantage of all the time, and we love them to death. Belgium, we've already shipped boxes of our hand-spun wool to Belgium. We've got inquiries from Spain. We're becoming known. We had an expert from Wales. I met him in Rome the first time we met Daniel, right? Yeah. And then he came to Armenia for our wool forum in last November. We had a wool forum, pulled the whole wool world of Armenia into one room. And he said, after visiting our spinning center, he said, Tim, do you realize that these 7 ladies up in Amasya that are hand spinning yarn at approximately 250 kilos a month is the largest production in one place of hand-spun wool in all of Europe? And I said, that can't be possible. That cannot be possible. He said, it's too expensive in Europe. It's way too expensive for somebody to do an industrial scale production of hand-spun yarn. And you're doing it. So I was amazed.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a lot of what we're talking about are the economics of caring, of looking at social challenges and addressing them through design and infrastructure design and product design. You mentioned the notion and potential for Armenia to be a lab where issues that exist internationally can be addressed and experimented with locally with global ramifications. On the one hand, that sounds extremely exciting. And it also sounds a little bit scary because in any kind of experimentation, in any kind of lab context, there's a cost and there's an outcome. And so if the cost of innovation is borne locally, but the ramifications are international, it seems like there's room for international investment in treating these things as things that can be resolved here. Is there a state plan to kind of expand those conversations with other international actors and create buy-in and framing Armenia as a potential place where that can happen? You mentioned specific interest in Arm.wool as far as Sweden and Norway, but on a state level here, does it feel like the state is positioning itself that way and trying to draw international investment?
We're way bigger than wool in that question.
It's bigger than wool.
It's way bigger than wool, which is great. This is a macro question, right? And I think, yes, there's definitely a strategy for encouraging investment. We have the AI production, whatever it is, up in Razdan or Tsakatsor or whatever that is that is going. That's not the first thing I would have invested in, but it's part of a government plan to create investment in the country. My personal opinion, with my very limited knowledge, because I don't know everything that's going on in the government, I don't know all the investment programs there are by any means, but I would build on the micro, lots of micros, and build up to the macro instead of a massive kaboom. That's just my personal opinion. If we can, and back to wool, national wool strategy, that can become a bigger something up towards the macro. All right. If we do that step by step from the grassroots and work up, and that's not only wool. We can talk about our water resources. We can talk about groundwater in particular, and we can talk about what the artificial fertilizer and the algae bloom we see in Sivan Lake. And do we have national strategies for that can work up to the macro for a better more environmentally sound and financially sound Armenia. That would be my big, hairy goal on a national basis, but I'm not a participant in that. I'm down here on the wool level doing my little thing as a part of something that I hope happens.
Yeah, I think there is attention being paid to some of the things you mentioned, Tim. The groundwater, they're starting to pay attention to that. Sevon, they've been paying attention to that. The algae, they are paying attention to these things. I don't know that anybody's paying attention to wool. Right? And that's why Tim mentioned the national strategy for wool. They're not putting it together. So we're trying to do this. We're trying to actually get one across the line. We're trying to get the funding to actually pay for a legitimate national strategy for the use of the wool. And that part of that strategy will include policy recommendations. Part of that strategy will see if it's viable to scale it. Is there enough wool in the country, for example, to produce something at scale, to collect it logistically? There's a lot of things that go into the industrial side of the wool. And just to put it into context, I think we've talked about this before, 600,000 sheep maybe in Armenia, and next door, just to give you an idea of the numbers, 55 million sheep, right? So we're
in Turkey.
In Turkey, yeah. You know, in little Ireland too. I mean, 3 million sheep or something like this. So the sheep, we don't have the huge sheep population, but we want to know if it's enough to make a viable business. This is why we're trying to also open our doors to anybody from the EU that wants to take an interest. Say, I will help here. You know, we will come down and put some investment here. We want to study this. Whatever. It's to diversify. So in terms of the government, I don't think they're paying attention. That's maybe there's somebody in there that is. Maybe somebody will watch this and go, hey, I'm paying attention. Let's meet. Let's have a coffee.
I mean, they have a lot on their plates.
They do.
They have a heck of a lot on their plates.
That wasn't a criticism. That's just an observation.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think based on this conversation, the idea that Armenia's sheep population is a fraction of what it would be elsewhere can actually be understood as an asset because there is more room to try new processes without requiring massive scale changes to be made. I think please.
Just anecdotally, we were approached by an organization from Tavush Lori who are creating a massive sheep farm up there, and they heard about Arm.wool, and they came and talked to us. We got really excited. They got really excited. They wanted to know that they're raising sheep for the meat to be exported on the hoof, live, right, to the Middle East. Okay. And they wanted to know what can be done with the wool. And we're like, well, this is exciting because we observed very quickly, they're very aware of the environmental side of it. They're very aware of the data-driven side of things. They're very aware of all the stuff that we want them to be aware of, and they've got the money. They've got the money to do it. And so we're extremely pleased with them, and they've come to us with other questions about other species of sheep, and we're like, okay, we're Arm.wool, so I guess we need to learn quickly to answer his questions. And it's just an amazing. But for example, they have a water production unit up in Tavush, and I mentioned this issue of sheep in Armenia graze in pastures that include red book species of vegetation. And somewhere, somehow, sometime, we need to raise awareness on fencing off those areas with the red book species of vegetation so the sheep don't eat it. And he said, oh, wow, because we own a massive plot of land up in Tavush, and there are endangered species there. I'd love to know more about that. And so that's one of those rabbit holes, right? And then we have the conflict between domesticated animals and wild animals in Armenia, between wolves and sheep, wolves and cows, for example. There's an expert. There's a young female, amazing expert on that topic. Ostrik, is she still in Michigan? Wisconsin. She's still in Wisconsin studying this. So the conflict between wild animals and domesticated animals as a topic. If we're going to double the number of sheep in Armenia, what does that mean for the conflict between wildlife and domesticated animals and for red book endangered vegetation? So it's just like, oh, every day is an amazing mosaic of questions and challenges, and yeah.
And to that end, always for me, the ultimate challenge in this country is capacity building, right? The knowledge transfer, how to do something, how to. Yeah, and I'm not going to say I know how to raise sheep, but I'm familiar with grazing issues, overgrazing, grazing on redbook species. These are all things that would be built into, for example, a national policy on wool. It's like it's a lot of training, a lot of working with the shepherds and the sheep owners, and it comes down to even things like shearing.
Yeah.
Right? When they shear, they just shear. We had this conversation before about the fact that the wool has no value right now. There's no value for it, so they don't care what they do with it. They take it, they burn it, they spread it on a field. We're trying to make a value for wool so that we can buy the wool, so that it encourages them to treat the wool off the sheep from the beginning in the proper way. Take the skirt, the dirty stuff, put it off to one side, take the clean stuff, put it off to the other side, and then stack it neatly, cleanly, so it's not cross-contaminated. Little simple things like this are on the docket, right? Down the road, but it's going to take a while. And yeah.
If I just to comment on the new generation of Armenians, and we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm among the younger people. So we're advertising for a new position in Arm.wool. We've more or less made the decision now, but the quality of the applications we got in the years earlier, if we got one or two qualified candidates, we were kind of happy. We've got way more really solid candidates that have applied for this new position in Arm.wool on operations manager for the project, because we need more hands on deck. We're just overwhelmed with everything that's going on.
It's actually painful to pick one.
It's painful to pick because they're all so good and they're also enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that said, finally, a job opportunity that has positive impact on the environment, on Armenia, on rural places in Armenia, they're excited about the position, then we have to say no to all of them except one. Right? And that's so frustrating. Yeah.
I think it's a good moment. My first exposure to Arm.wool was at an exhibition. It was hosted by Kyle Handikian, who is using your wool to make these exquisite rugs that feature traditional cultural motifs and are handmade by Armenian women in rural areas. And speaking with him and speaking with you guys, I mean, what's striking is this intersection between culture, commerce, grassroots, but all kind of pointing towards macro ideologies that pertain to shifting economic priorities. So to see all of this happen at once is exhilarating, frankly. You guys spoke to the need of expertise, and expertise existing on two levels. There's domestic expertise, what the shepherds know, what the practices are here, how they can be implemented at a larger scale or adjusted, and expertise that necessarily comes from elsewhere. With more data, you understand better like economic outcomes. So what I think is exciting is in trying to solve for global problems, you inevitably build partnerships across these spheres on like policy, shepherds, international priorities. When you're trying to solve something that impacts everyone, you build friendships and relationships. Do you feel like, generally speaking, this is something that people are considerate of? Is there a lot of movement in this direction? Are there roadblocks?
I think we've made great partnerships already, and it started with the Wool Forum, and it's just gotten better since then. And Tim's a natural networker, so it's easy for us to do that. Before I go on, let's give one plug to Kyle. Kyle's organization called the Rug Code.
The Rug Code.
The Rug Code. So, and they're beautiful carpets. So,
In the rug code, what does the code mean? The patterns in traditional Armenian carpets are kind of a code. The symbol, the dragon, this and that and the other, they mean something. And that's where the name comes from.
so good job, Kyle.
Good job, Kyle.
So, the wool industry, I think, as far as I understand it, is not valued most places, right? There's certain places where, Scotland, for example, they've got a great tradition of wool. New Zealand, right? It's valued there, but across the rest of Europe, it's not valued. So these wool people seek each other out, right? And they say, let's work together. Let's do this. Share our knowledge. It's a kind of a close knit community in a way. But we don't know where the other one is. We don't know who's here, who's there.
Kirk and I were in Rome in September.
I forget when.
Yeah, late last year.
Yeah.
And we went to a conference on wool, and all the woolies of the world came there to talk to each other and go, yeah, that's cool. And they were all wearing their handmade wool sweaters and scarves and all that stuff. And it was our first time. And so we're like, these people are a little bit crazy, but they're passionate. They're passionate, right?
Yeah.
And Isabella Rossellini was there. Kirk was flirting with her.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't?
She's a wonderful lady. Her presentation there blew me away because it had a reference to Armenia. And we're sitting there in the audience, and they're from the U.S. and Canada and all of Europe and everything, and we're sitting there, and she puts us up, and she goes, and she literally, without meeting us, not knowing we're there, she goes, did you know that the original goat and the original sheep are from Armenia? The Bezwar goat and the Muflan are the original sheep and goat of the world. And I'm sitting in row 7 going, holy moly, what an amazing story, right? And then you were able to talk to her afterwards. And
And let's follow up on that. That was a wool conference specifically relevant to fashion. So the fashion industry is taking particularly Europe and the Western world is looking very closely at their fabrics and how they're made. And so much of the clothing industry uses, synthetic fibers made from petroleum products, etc. It's not all cotton. We'd like to think so, but it's not. This shirt might in fact be full of synthetics. I don't really know. So the fashion industry is kind of is one of the driving forces of the new look at wool. And here in Armenia, they're going to start that as well. It just so happens that our project lead, Ani, which we've mentioned before, is a founder of Pet Tour, which is a fashion company, and a founding member of Five Concept, which is well known by people in the fashion industry here. So they're looking at this now as well. So this fashion is going to start to push this, right? And that could include clothing all the way to, like upholstery. There's a lot of uses for it. So
Can I tell another anecdote?
Please.
Something, when you plug away at something every day, it's so nice every once in a while to have one of those aha moments where you learn something that you had no idea, and it just came out of the blue and hits you in the head. And we were on a call with the U.S., with Astrid, ethnic Armenian from the U.S., met her at the Hadrut Center here in Yerevan. And we got in a conversation, and now we're trying to develop a project together, and it's just boom, 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 boom. And she mentioned in a phone call, I mentioned that we're having refugees from Artsakh crochet products for an organization in Europe called Made 51 that only markets products made by refugees. And so we've taken that concept, products made by refugees. We worked with the Syrian Armenians here for many, many years already, using wool actually. But now we've brought in the Artsakhs and said, okay, we can work with you, but only if you use the wool, right? And they've been traditionally crocheting products using synthetics. Now we're saying, no, you need to use the wool. They made a sample of a product, and they said our yarn was very difficult to work with because it kept breaking. And Astrid, sitting on the other end of the Zoom call, she goes, oh, you're crocheting. Oh, they're probably doing an S spin on the yarn up in Amasya. They should be doing a Z spin if you're going to use it for crochet. And
Wow.
I was just like, what the heck is a Z
Yeah.
spin, right? And so we're like, Ostrik, you need to get on a plane and come over here and go to Amasya and teach these women how to do a Z spin. And then we need to create a new shelf in the warehouse that is Z spin yarn, and the S spin yarn is for the carpet industry. And so these things, every day we have something like this, and we're just like, holy moly, my head is going to burst.
Yeah, we don't know a lot about wool. We just pretend. There's so much to learn.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
This is amazing. So one of the questions I had was along the way, what are some of the things that each of you have learned that you didn't expect?
You don't have time for that.
Really, it's just, that's what makes life. That's what gets us out of bed every day, I think, is if we don't learn something today, why are we doing this? If we don't get challenged every day, why are we doing this?
I mean, Z-spin, S-spin, these are, this is exciting new information.
Yeah. I mean, every day.
Yeah.
It's a steep learning curve. But it's the challenge of it, right? In the end, it's you want to contribute something. You know, what Walt Whitman, you contribute a verse. I think we're trying to contribute a verse while we can. We have a. I'm going to upset people, but when things get rough here and things get rough, when things look overwhelming here, we do have a joke about Ohio. You know, we could be working in Ohio, right?
Selling insurance.
Yes, we both lived in Ohio, so it's like, well, you could be living in Ohio doing whatever.
Our apologies to the insurance brokers in Ohio.
Yes. But
we have such an interesting life.
But we're here doing some. We have no background in wool. You're right. None. Zero. No background in sheep, no background in wool, no background, but trying to make a go of it. Right. And it's exciting.
But important for me, and I think for you as well, is to be very aware of where we fit into the macro thing, right? Where do we fit in the bigger picture? And you gotta that big hairy goal I was talking about is how do we fit into that larger macro something? And we have to have a big hairy goal. National wool strategy, a national waste strategy. I'm sure there is a national waste strategy. You know, how does what we do, what does each individual down here, how does that fit into a larger something? And that again fits into a larger something on the national level, right? This is a democracy, and we vote. I don't vote. I'm not a citizen, but people vote here, and how does that vote fit into a larger something? And so what we do every day has to.
So practically speaking, I mean, given, for example, when you're learning about, Z spins versus S spins, and then, you have to bring that information here. There are women working with their hands that will then use a new method to get a better product. So you mentioned everybody having their place within this context. How do you each individually conceptualize your own strengths and responsibilities? Is it bringing people together? Is it finding new techniques? What's like, and is it a consistent position, or is it changing depending on what's needed?
The pedagogue, please.
It's ever shifting, and I don't. For instance, the crochet thing, I'm not involved in that part of it, right? I find it interesting. I was on the call, I'm like, Z-spin, okay, whatever. And it was in and out, right?
Yeah.
Tim remembers because it's more his thing, right? Culture, heritage, these kinds of crafts. I'm consumed with trying to figure out how to use the wool, 97% of it, right? That won't get used in carpets. And to that end, I'm glad we met, Roger, who's the Swedish expert who I'm going to go visit. He's going to help. He'll help guide in that regard. I'm going to go see his operation from A to Z up there. I'm going to learn about it and see what we can maybe bring down here, provided we get a foothold here, provided we get a national strategy. Once we have that document, and if it shows that the wool industry is economically viable here in Armenia, then investment dollars can come in. And in that case, then we set up shop in some fashion to produce some product, heretofore unnamed, right? Which we will figure out.
We had the first person come through the door of our office the other day and say, I'd like to invest in your project. What kind of structure do you have? What kind of payoff? What kind of... and we were like, what? Okay, are we ready for this?
Yeah, it's coming. We're resurrecting a value chain, an entire value chain. So there's value in that, and somebody's going to see it and want to be part of it. If you're social impact or social, if you're into social entrepreneurship, where you get a return on your money, but you're not expecting, a return of 10 to 15 to 20%. Well, this may be perfect for you. Okay, and this is the kind of people that are attracted to what we do, right?
It's so interesting because it occurs to me that the people that might invest early stage would be motivated intrinsically by something different than people that would join down the line. So if you're invested in seeing better outcomes, not just economic outcomes, but outcomes that are better for like all kinds of social considerations, then you would come in earlier because you're investing in that. But then the trick is to use that momentum to create an economic landscape where additional funding can come in and see opportunities. So presumably, yeah, there's more risk at the beginning, but the motivations are different. And the earlier risk, typically, if it does go in a direction that's economically viable, you get that reward as well because you're in early. Internationally, how much attention is there to social innovation, and does it come mostly from the state actors or from private investment? Like, is it hard to find financing for social projects? Where do you go for it?
So that's a great question. I think it's when I think of social entrepreneurship, I'm thinking of Europe. Europe has money, right? The West has money. They can afford to invest in these kinds of things. They have investors for this, but Armenia is not quite there. But that's where Nazareth comes in. Nazareth Saparian, who we mentioned earlier on
our
the board,
other board member,
who's now the director of the Impact Hub. He's the one that created the VIA fund for that exact purpose, right? So the vehicle for social investment exists in Armenia, started by Nazareth in the hub. So if people are interested, that's where you go. So it's there. Is it widespread throughout Armenia? No, it's not. And it's not widespread throughout the world because a lot of the countries are most people are just trying to make a go of it. They're just trying to live, exist, make enough money, blah, 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 right? All that stuff. But there's enough money coming in now to Armenia, particularly from the diaspora, right? Now that the economic climate is more or less stabilized relative to what it was, that I think it could be possible to expand those opportunities.
It's such an interesting thing when we think about if one feels nationally, individually, that the priority is survival, then the long-term horizon is greatly shortened. You're not making decisions for 20 years from now, you're making decisions for next week, which I think imbues those of us who have the opportunity and the luxury of imagining a longer time horizon. There's a responsibility there to do just that and to not organize things selfishly, but to organize at scale and make sure that we can conceptualize and act on those outcomes.
Let's give you a concrete example of this. The most concrete example I can think of is the use of salitra. This is a fertilizer. It's granular texture. It's an import from Russia. It's nitrogen. It's pure nitrogen, and it's subsidized by the government. And it's used by I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of small farmers here, right? Hundreds of thousands, probably in the thousands. And it's used because it's cheap. Supplement it, and you spread it on the field, and it works, right? For a while. What happens after a while is because you're not tending to the soil. This is the small farmer thing, right? I want a product now. I want a crop now. I want to grow it, sell it, make money. 5 years down the road of consistent use of salitre, and your soil starts getting depleted because all you're adding is nitrogen. Where's the potassium? Where's the phosphorus? Where's the micronutrients, macronutrients? Where are those coming from? They're being sucked out, the existing ones, the ones that are there, by the plants that you're growing, and then they're gone. So you've created a denuded field, a field of no nutrient, right? And then the runoff continues, then there's environmental problems. So this is short-term gain, no long-term thinking, but it's survival mode for these guys. So how does the government come in and start addressing this, or how do investors approach this kinds of thing? These are big questions.
This is
part of it.
This is the old from survive to thrive,
Yeah.
right? And we feel we're part of the moving that bar from survive to thrive.
I mean, what's interesting right now is actually the cost of strictly surviving is unsustainable, right? Like if we are only thinking short term, if we are only thinking about surviving, then actually our survival is threatened.
Yes.
So it's a really interesting paradigm shift we're navigating right now because we actually need to think about thriving in order to survive.
Thus the big, hairy goal.
Yeah.
We should all have a big, hairy goal.
Yeah.
Imagine where I can be in 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? That's the big, hairy goal. You don't need to know exactly how you're going to get there. And you got to start here. You got to start down here, right? And work today down here. But you got to have a vision for where you want to be.
So let me ask, please.
You got to have people though that think 50, 100 years out too. There's got to be people in the country that have to do that.
Yeah.
No one thinks that far, but you should. I mean, you're going to leave. Do you want Armenia to be around in 200 years? I mean, do you? Well, can we keep doing what we're doing, knowing that it will destroy the country? Can we keep sucking out all the groundwater from Ararat Valley? Is that going to be an issue in 50 years, 100 years? Of course it is. So you have to move, right? You have to have these kinds of guys too.
Okay, so both of you in the wool space, there's the macro, there's the wool, we're in the wool. 5 years down the line, what do you hope to see as far as developments within this project?
We have a national wool strategy.
Yep.
We have a highly structured and functioning national collection system. Side note, how many countries in Europe have a national collection system for wool? 1. Norway. Right? And heavily subsidized by the government. How do we make that sustainable? Nationally functioning, sustainable collection system, and then an established market access for products made of wool by whomever. Lots of small companies that use the wool. Right? And this is why we talked about we need a feasibility study to create the national wool strategy. And that will tell us, are we making insulation panels? Are we making fabric, furniture fabric? Are we making machine spun wool instead of hand spun? What are we doing? We need a feasibility study to be able to get there. That's our next step towards our big hairy goal.
And 5 years, I mean, I agree with these goals, of course. We need Arm.wool to be sustainable. Right now, Arm.wool is applying for grants, with the international development agencies, blah, all the stuff, handout. Yeah, we want this, we want you, right? That's not sustainable long term. So I see Arm.wool moving into a business model where they have a production facility of some sort. Is it processing and production, or is it just production? Don't know that yet. And what's going to be produced there? And because Arm.wool, we don't want it to go away. We want it to be the place where anybody in the country that has sheep or has wool or wants to do wool products can come to for assistance and help and guidance, and a market for their goods perhaps, or whatever, right? To produce their own things. So the guy I'm visiting in Sweden has developed a model. He calls it a hub. It's a natural fibers hub, and we're considering that as well. So we have all these ideas. We don't know yet where to go. The feasibility study / national wool strategy that will tell us a lot. That will give us a lot of direction.
The Arm.wool is it needs to be sustainable. I agree. We're going to need funding to become what we want to be, the place anybody who has any kind of question about wool comes to us and asks us. That guy said, what do you know? We had a email the other day. What do you know about the sheep in Lebanon? Because we're considering importing some sheep from Lebanon into Armenia because there's a difference in their meat and in their wool and. And so we're helping him as best we can. That's the kind of people, oh, I have a question about wool. Let's go to Arm.wool, right? That's what we want to do. Is it going to be a membership organization where to get help, you need to pay your way, you need to be a member? Should I be charging that guy up in Lori to give him our network in Lebanon? We need to figure out how to make it sustainable. Yes, but we're going to need help to get to that level. Yes.
Two things. One, so in another piece I was developing, I got to spoke with the World Trade Center in Yerevan, and their business model is exactly that. It's a membership basis. You pay for access to their international network and for information. So yeah, the idea of, as you guys are out adventuring, finding information, building these relationships, building commerce, yeah, the idea of offering that as a product makes a lot of sense. As far as these 5-year goals, what are the metrics that you can pay attention to along the way to determine whether progress is being made? Obviously, there's profitability as far as ensuring viability, but what are some other metrics? We talked about tracking the volume of sheep. What are the numbers?
The metrics for this project, I assume you mean the KPIs. What are the KPIs for success in this project in the next year, the next 5 years, etc.? Next week, at our new office at the Impact Hub, with the new hire at the table, with the project lead, Ani, at the table, with Kirk, me, Nazareth at the table, we're going to do a strategy session with an external facilitator so that we are structured in how we do this, because we're very aware that we need to have a very clear, structured strategy for every step we're going to make going forward, and we're going to establish those KPIs for the new hire, for the project lead, for me as the founder, for Kirk as a consultant in the project, and where do we want to be, how are we going to get there, and what are the steps? What those are, I can imagine, I could guess, and we've mentioned them through this whole conversation about jobs, about the environment, about sharing skills and sorting skills and all the cochineal bugs and everything. So I think we need to wait about 10 days, no more, 3 weeks maybe, before we get an answer to that. But we are very aware that we need to have those, and we're aiming very strongly at doing that.
Yeah. And in the shortest term, we have to bolster the existing value chain as it is, and it runs. That's the value chain that runs through Amasya, through Shirak. So if we can get that bolstered, strengthened, then that's kind of driving the rest of it. That's keeping us going. That's producing the product, and we want a major KPI in that is make them sustainable. We want them to spin off. We want them to spin off naturally and be self-sustainable. That's the goal for most things we do here. Yeah.
The spinning center in Amasya is already an independent, sustainable organization. We're working with them. We don't just drop them and say, "Oh, go for it." Oh, we're there every month. We visit them, but they are an independent, functioning organization. Worth visiting, by the way.
Yeah, by the way, worth visiting.
Guys, this has been such a pleasure. It's been very informative. It's not always often that when you speak with someone or people who are driving a private enterprise, you get to wish them the best, not only because you enjoy them as people and you want them to enjoy success, but also because the implications in this case of success are so wide reaching and benefit so many people and systems. So really wishing you the best both, and looking forward to seeing and hearing about how things develop. Thank you so much for being here today.
And thank you for your interest. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
That's fantastic.
It's been amazing. Yeah.